So how you doing? Hey, tonight I want to have a little discussion and kind of discuss a few secrets that I've not been telling you guys about. So I have been watching some videos. I watch, other channels and everything. And I was watching Bodie's channel, the Novice Lumberjack, and he started talking about this saw right here, the 130. And it kind of made me realize I should probably do this video because I've never told anybody what kind of port work I've done to that saw to get it to where it is. And I believe there's some misunderstandings that I just want to make sure that the information is out there and it's clear what I have actually done to that saw. And because I've never put a video out about the actual port work. It just basically appeared on the channel one day and I was into the testing stages. So let me kind of explain what I did to it, because I think you guys might be quite surprised of how it's running with the work that I've done, because I found a few things to help the saw that, I think you guys are going to be surprised the amount of port work that I've done to that saw. So let me tell you exactly what I have done to that saw. Alrighty? Alright, so there it is, the Super XL 130 sitting next to the 925. You'll see she has a stack muffler on it. That muffler was only put on there so I could run it at Sawfest, but I couldn't run it because it developed a fuel leak and it started pouring out all over the bar and chain. I wasn't about to run it with gas getting all over the chain, you know what I mean? So I kind of had to back out of that run. But there's the 130, and I got some secrets on that saw that I've never told you about. So let me kind of go over a few things here. So you'll see the big stack set up on that, the big carburetor and everything. So I actually had that carburetor here already, and I was going to use it on another project. I was actually planning on putting that 395 carb on the 925. That was the original plan. I was going to put that carburetor and everything on this saw. But I decided one day, let's just see what happens. Let's throw it on there. And we got some surprising results. I was not expecting it to actually like that carburetor, and it does. Now, as far as the stack setup, it's actually quite easy to do that modification. And the only reason I did that is because I'm tired of having air filter issues, because these stock air filters suck. You can get them on there, you try to seal them up and everything, but whenever you port them and you start trying to suck more air through, you end up getting fines through it. And I got tired of dealing with that, so I figured why not just put the stack on it and, go that method. Now I can tell you this air filter is going to have to go, so if you do this modification, that style of air filter sucks. Go with a foam style. These filters don't stop the real fine particles, so go with one of the foam setups because they're better, you know what I mean? But you want to go a little bit taller because that one's quite short, so go a little taller but a foam setup. But that carburetor is literally only on there in that setup with that stack setup because I got tired of dealing with air filter issues. That's the only reason I did that. And it just, I was surprised at the results I got from it, because it went from, a normal running saw to a saw that wouldn't four-stroke. It would just kept going and going and going, you know what I mean? Now, the muffler, I've been through different mufflers. This is the final setup that I found, and this is the one that performs the best. Stock mufflers don't perform that great. They don't enhance the performance between any, you know what I mean? They don't enhance the performance of the saw. Anything stock. I've tried opening them up, I've tried doing everything, and none of them do anything to help enhance the performance of the saw. So this type of pipe is the only thing I have found that will enhance the performance of the saw. So that's why I went with that. I've tried the stacks and everything. None of them really enhance it until you get into that. Now for the part you've been kind of waiting for. For the port work, It is actually an extremely simple port job. Very simple, very basic. So the performance I'm getting this out of this saw is not so much about the port work, but because of the combination of things that I did to enhance the performance of the saw. So this saw with this setup basically is just correcting the issues with the muffler, correcting the issues at the carburetor, and the reeds, and all that stuff to get it to perform where it is. As far as the port work, it's really not that extravagant, and it's actually quite a basic port job. So let me flip the camera around here and I'll explain to you what I'm talking about. Okay, so as far as port jobs are concerned, when you think of port jobs and different saws, what do you think of? You think of doing machine work, get to the base, you know, maybe some squish band work if you're a little bit more advanced. And then, you know, whatever grinding work you do to the transfers and exhaust and the intake and all that stuff. Well, this 130 is a reed, so the only grinding work in the intake is really just to clean it up a little bit. The reeds themselves handle all the timing. So the intake on the reed saws is quite easy. The main thing you got to worry about is getting your reeds to function properly. So that's why I put so much time into the reeds, figuring out exactly what works. And now that I've done it a few times, I know that my reed setup is definitely working. I just don't know how it's going to work, you know, years down the road. So what I got here is it does perform flawlessly. So, you know, as far as the reeds are concerned in the intake, it's just cleaning it up, really. Now, as far as transfer work, all that's really done to the transfers is basically what I would call port matching. Basically getting the crankcase lined up with the transfers in the cylinder and doing my typical grinding work, making sure everything is working smoothly and everything. But I did take it just a little bit further than that, but not a lot. Just a little bit. So there isn't a whole lot of extravagant transfer work. I did not change the timing of the uppers at all. You know, none of that stuff. And you know, the one thing I would say kind of works into the transfers is I did put the boost ports in, or finger ports, however you want to call it. I am dragging them out of the crankcase, so you know, some people would define them differently, but I do have 2 fingers ran in there, timed to open about the same time as the transfers. Everything I have on that saw is opening almost at the same time. The boosts are just maybe a degree earlier, maybe a degree or 2 early. But I technically wouldn't say a degree or 2 early, because the grinding bit I used is kind of rounded at the tip, and the little, you know, it kind of rounds over at the nub, and just that little tiny bit of rounded over that sticks up is what's like a degree or 2 further than the transfers. So, you know, by the time the full width of the finger is open, you know, it's probably timed closer to the same as the transfers. It's just got this little tiny nub from the grinding bit that kind of sticks up a little bit further. So to me, basically, they are probably opening about all at the same time. I think it has to do with the direction that I have those fingers pointed that really helps the saw the most. The way they're actually flowing to help push the exhaust gases out. Because that was the main reason that I put them in there, was to help push exhaust gases out of the saw. Now, as far as squish goes, squish band and all that, nothing. I did 0. All this saw has is a base gasket delete. I did nothing else to help boost the compression of this saw. Nothing. No lathe, no welding, no nothing. I literally just got rid of the gasket, sat it on there, and whatever it got. I don't remember the exact squish number this saw sitting at, but I think it's in the low 20s, mid 20s, somewhere in there, maybe around 25. So, you know, it's nothing extravagant. I could get more performance out of this saw, like probably a considerable bit more, if I would actually get in there and do some work in that neighborhood. And I might do that here someday, because I mean, if I ported this saw up like a not modern saw, like the way they do the squish band work and all that stuff, the performance of this saw will probably come up pretty good. So I don't think we're seeing the maximum output of this saw at all. I think it's still got a lot of room to go, especially if I really pushed the squish and brought the compression up. This saw's only sitting at like 175, 80, 180 pound of compression right now. So it's nothing spectacular. So the performance I'm getting out of it is probably coming mostly from the transfers, relationship to the exhaust and the intake and everything. It has nothing to do with any one item. It's the combination of everything, from the carburetor, you know, the reeds, the exhaust timing, the way it relates to the transfers, how everything flows. That's what's really producing the power of the saw. And over time, that's what I have been doing, is I've just been doing fine tweaks, little bit here and there, just kind of figuring out what little thing is holding the saw back the most. Then kind of making those small tweaks and adjustments and everything, just to kind of see how it would perform. Now, the stack filter wouldn't even be on this saw if I didn't get tired of the air filters. And, you know, I'd still be running the other carb setup. So, I don't know. It did help it perform a lot better, just because of the increased airflow. But this air filter is allowing the really small fines through. So I am going to have to go with a different air filter, which might, you know, impede some performance. But I need to keep the fines out of there, so that's more important. Now, as far as the exhaust goes, she's a little higher than what most people would go. I know it's in the 90s. I'm thinking in the 98, somewhere around 98 degrees, which is probably why my compression isn't as high as I prefer. But I could do some things to this to help increase the RPM of the saw. It has plenty of torque. It has plenty of torque for me to do some tweaks to the exhaust to help boost the RPM a little bit. Because the only part that's at like 98 degrees is dead center at where the bridge at the exhaust port is. The outside corners are still at factory setting. So if I would take those outside corners and move them up to the same timing as what the center of the exhaust port is set at, I would increase RPM for certain. Probably lose a little bit of torque, but you know, it would definitely increase in RPM, I think. The saw has enough torque to do it. It definitely does. Especially if I wanted to do something like drop it down to 325, I think it would pull that even better. So that's kind of one of the things I'm going to be doing with it whenever I do the cylinder swap and drop it in CC. I am going to lose 4 CC, but you know, I think I'll be all right. I think so. Now, I did put the saw on the dyno at SawFest, and it did put up a respectable number, but there was an issue. So whenever I took it to SawFest, the day before, I was able to run it in its current configuration and just fine. But the day of the race, I had to take that muffler off and take it back to the stack muffler. Now, I was hoping that I would get a chance to tune it real quick before the race, but that didn't happen. I didn't have time. I didn't have the opportunity. So I ended up having to race the saw without a proper tune, and it ended up being so dang rich, it hardly performed as good as it normally does. But that's all right. You know, I went out there and I had fun regardless. You know, the saw ended up running super rich because whenever I pull this muffler off and I put the stack on, I have to richen it up. It ends up running way lean on me, and it basically starts starving for fuel in the first cut. So I had to richen it up, and I richened it up too far. So, you know, the saw performed horribly during the race. But whenever I took it back to this muffler and then put it on the dyno, I didn't have the chance to give it a good proper tune. And, you know, the dyno number came up less than I was expecting. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go ahead and send this all to Dyno Joe just to make sure, just to make sure we get an accurate number. My tune on the dyno that day was way off. It was obvious. I mean, the saw just 4-stroke during the whole dyno run. So yeah, it was nothing but 4-stroking the whole time. So who knows where the horsepower rating of this saw is actually going to be at whenever we actually take it to dyno. But we'll see. But I thought I should put this video out there because I have never put up a single video about the port work on this saw. And it's really, to me, it's not extravagant. There's no machine work done at all. It's just some transfer work, a little bit of exhaust work and everything. Most of the time was just figuring out what aspects of the saw were holding it back. So what you're seeing here is just me figuring out what the carburetor issues were that were holding it back, the air filter issues were holding it back, muffler issues were holding it back. This is me getting this saw to breathe properly before, we did any real machine work to try to boost this compression. If I did some machine work and put this thing up, 230 pounds plus, like a lot of the modern ported saws of, the 60cc Class R, who knows where it would perform at. I have not done it. And, I can't do it to the current cylinder without having a free port, but there are other methods to do it. And, I could do it. I could, try to talk to Brennan Cass about building a custom head for it so we could get her down, or talk to Briscoe and see if he would want to try to do it. We might look at doing that whenever we take it to down to the 54cc though. Might look at getting a custom head done. But like Brennan and I know each other, but it's not like we don't talk to each other. So I'm not going to be like imposing and saying, hey, I need you to build a head for me or anything like that. You know what I mean? So that's one of the reasons I'm trying to get a lathe in here so I can start doing some of this stuff. Because I do want to keep doing these vintage saws, but just about all of them are going to have custom heads built. Just about all of them. And, set up that way to get the squish to where I want it. So, that's one of the reasons I want to put the lathe in. But as far as comparing it to a modern saw, no, it's not going to perform as good as a modern ported saw. But then again, I can't do the same port work to this as modern ported saws. The work that I've done to it is no different than a lot of your basic mild port jobs on modern saws. And, at Sawfest, it came in the middle of the pack, even at running super rich, 4-stroking constantly. You know what I mean? So you guys seen enough test videos of it. You know where she runs normally. So, we'll see how she does here in the future. But I am, I'm that kind of guy. I'm dedicated to my saws, and I want to see what this thing is really capable of, which is one of the reasons I'm trying to get the lathe and get it in here and start doing this stuff. Start doing the same kind of port work on these old saws that they do to the modern saws. I want to see where they actually do run at. Will they compete with a modern saw? Probably not. Well, maybe they will. You don't know. I don't think I've ever seen anybody do it to one of these saws, So, I want to find out. I love the old Homelites, don't you? But wouldn't you like to see what they're really capable of? So that's what we're getting ready to do. We're going to start doing some of this stuff. And, we're going to see what happens. But I just wanted to clarify a few things, because this saw is not actually ported as a hot saw. This is a basic mild port job with some fingers thrown in. Really, it's a base gasket delete. The lowers are matched to the lowers are matched to the crankcase. Took the exhaust up a little bit, polished it out. I mean, nothing you would expect to be different on any other ported saw, from a modern saw. And, I did no machine work to it. So is it a hot saw for a Homelite? No, we can go hotter. This saw, I think, is capable of even more. I could probably I think I could get another 2,000 RPM out of it if I did some more to it. The question is whether or not it can handle it. And, I want to keep pushing it until we start having failures. And then whenever we start having those failures, like the connecting rod stretching or stuff like that, then we'll look at, fixing those issues. But until I start getting into failures like that, the connecting rod stretching from the RPM or blowing the bearings or something because of the RPM, until I get to that point, I'm going to still keep pushing it. I'm just taking it a little bit at a time because I need to know that fail point. If I don't know exactly where that fail point is, then it's hard for me to, take it to the next step. I got to find that point, and it's long, it's tedious and everything, but, I'm enjoying it. Aren't you? We get to learn a lot along the way. But I thought you guys would be intrigued to know that saw is really not a hot pork chop at all. It's just the right combination of exhaust, carb, air filter, a right combination of all that stuff took that saw to where it is. And what's going to happen whenever we start doing more to it, like that 4910 Briscoe built for me, easily 230 pound of compression, easily. I've never put it on, but I bet you it's easily every bit of 230 pound. Where that Homelite's about 175 pound. What is that? What would an extra 50 pound of compression do to that saw with a 98 roof, in this configuration? What would that do to this saw? Should be performing a lot better, and that's one of the things I want to do next. So I want to find that failure. I want them connecting rods to start blowing apart. I want to find them bearings blowing apart. That way we can figure out what we got to do to fix those issues and keep going. Talk to Harvey. Just look at the Iron Horse with his 372s. That's what he did. He'd build a saw, bearings would blow out. He'd have to figure out something to fix it. That's how all the modern saws are done. It's just we're just starting to develop it on this one, and it just happens to be an old saw. So let's see what happens. Let's see where the performance of this saw ends up whenever we are done. I thought some people out there might be confused at thinking this is a hot saw, and it's actually not. It's not a hot saw build at all. It's just a mild build with the right configuration of parts. It's surprising, isn't it? It's an easy pork job that anybody could do, that you've already seen me do a bunch of times on the channel. It's kind of funny. But I think just because I never showed any videos on the actual port work, that a lot of people are misunderstanding and thinking that that's a lot hotter build than what it really is, because it's really not. That's actually what this Homelite is capable of from the factory, just by doing a few tweaks to clean up the imperfections of the technology back in the day. That's really all it is. So, you know what I mean? But anyway, hey, let's catch you on the next one. All right, later.